Hello, Teacher Brian. Please introduce yourself briefly.
Hi, I'm Teacher Brian, and I'm Canadian. I'm a journalist for 20 years in Canada, and I was a foreign correspondent here in Asia before I began teaching, and I've lived here for a very long time. I've been teaching for 13 years in the Philippines, always at language academies.
So you teach ESL, IELTS, and SAT. Which do you prefer to teach? Students in the basic level or students in the middle or higher level?
I think those should be separate questions, right? Because they're separate, right? About the first of all about the what we prefer to teach. I prefer to teach ESL, I think, and SAT. Although IELTS may be the most important thing that I teach. The problem with IELTS from my point of view is that when I teach IELTS, I'm to a large extent a score raiser rather than a teacher. I'm a coach. It's a very, very important job, but it's not quite the same as teaching English itself. When you're teaching English, you're really teaching the basics of English and you're really getting the students to improve. With IELTS, you're trying to improve the score. And so I certainly understand why students want to improve the score. But for me, I would rather concentrate on English itself and improving English rather than score raising. SAT is particularly challenging for non-English speaking students. SAT is extremely hard. And I like it myself. I like the challenge a lot with the students. I like working with that challenge a lot. I think it's very much for the very best students. The very best students do well with it, I think. Age group, you want to talk about age group, I think?
Age group. So, okay. What students are you teaching these days, and what are their goals, and how are you helping them achieve their goals?
Well, over my career, obviously, I've taught all kinds of students from all over Asia. Usually Koreans, but an awful lot of Vietnamese, Chinese, Taiwanese, Japanese. That's been the case right up until COVID. But COVID has changed everything for me and for us here in the Philippines. Right now, I'm actually teaching a very interesting group who are mostly teenage Koreans who live in the Philippines. They're mostly teenagers who've been here since they were 5 or 6 years old, speak terrific English, but are now moving on to university. And they're doing IELTS and SAT, and they're doing a tremendous job of IELTS and SAT. I mean, we're getting wonderful scores from them. Eights in IELTS, eights in writing. So we've got some really, really good students here. But these are students, they're Koreans, but they're not normal Koreans. They're Koreans who have spent a lot of time in the Philippines. Normally, over time, I have mostly taught people in their teens and 20s. But on many occasions, we get older students also. We have taught Japanese executives who are traveling to another country and don't speak English well and need to run an office in Thailand or something like that. We've taught a lot of different students. After COVID, obviously things will change and we'll go back very much the way it was before, I would think.
Can a Korean middle school student who cannot English well come to the Philippines to adapt to a new environment and achieve academic achievement and go to college in other countries?
Of course, it depends on their level and it depends on how much time they're willing to spend here. You can't do a miracle in 2 weeks, but if they are willing to spend time here, there's no limit on how far they can go, how good they can get. We have students now, I have students now who are going to the very best universities in Korea. And we have students who've gone to universities and schools all around the world. The Philippines, obviously, the Philippines is affordable and friendly. The reason people come here, a lot of people would maybe prefer to go to the US or Canada or Australia, but the Philippines is closer and warmer and cheaper, and we can do things in the Philippines. You know, perhaps the very best thing of the Philippines compared to other countries is we can do one-on-one here. This is almost impossible to find anywhere in the world. When you go to Canada and Australia and pay much more money to study, you're in a class of 25 or 30 students, maybe with very little personal contact with your teachers at all. If you see the teachers on the campus, they might not even recognize you. Here in the Philippines, you get one-on-one, very, very personal treatment. And I think this is obviously the best way to teach. Almost all of my career, I have taught mostly one-on-one. We do group classes, of course, and during COVID, I've done a lot of Zoom classes, both one-on-one and group classes. But the real advantage of the Philippines is being able to sit down and here at Hana Academy, we have, each teacher has a nice little room where there's just 2 chairs, just us and the students. 1 chair for the students, 1 chair for us. Close the door, and 45 minutes at a time, they have your complete attention. And I think this is really, this is the secret sauce of the Philippines. You can't get this anywhere else. You can't afford one-on-one teaching anywhere else in the world. It would just be too expensive. Here in the Philippines, that's what you get. Okay, that's good, I think. That's a good point, right? It's a huge point in our favor. There's no question. It's unique.
Yes.
But you can't find it anywhere.
Please briefly explain some tips for teaching IELTS, SAT for each part. For students, how to study IELTS and SAT for each part.
Yeah. Okay, this is really hard. Obviously, let me start with the IELTS writing. As a journalist, obviously, and a writer, this is what I usually teach, and this is what is by far the hardest. Of the 4 parts of IELTS, normally students who have 7.5 overall have a 6 or 6.5 in writing, and this is simply because writing is the hardest. When you're doing writing, you're doing a lot of things. If you're just speaking, you concentrate on speaking. If you're doing listening, you concentrate on listening. But with writing, this tests everything. It tests your vocabulary, it tests your grammar, it tests how fast you can work, how much you know. It tests the quality of your opinions and certainly the quality of your training. You know, I have had, maybe this will help students. The best student I've had in the last year who ended up with an 8 in IELTS, the first time she wrote for me was terrible. She did a terrible job the first time. It was just one gigantic paragraph. She didn't even know how to put paragraphs together. And within a few weeks, she was passing IELTS with flying colors. Now, she was good. Her English is very, very good. But this shows you that at the beginning, people don't know how to do IELTS. Even the smartest people, even the best students. She's number 1 in her class in high school, but she had no idea how to write an IELTS essay. So writing IELTS is something you have to work on. You need somebody like me, actually. You need somebody who knows what they're doing and somebody who can teach you to write. The others, there's the other parts of IELTS. Obviously, listening requires you to have been around native speakers, or certainly to have watched a lot of native speakers speak. Because in IELTS listening, people will not slow down to your speed. They speak at their own speed. Your ear must become accustomed to it. Also, there's a strategy of getting ahead of the questions. You need to know You need to be prepared and to be looking at the questions when you hear the answers. You can't just wait and try to do it afterwards, because that becomes a test of your memory rather than your understanding. So even a native speaker, if they don't answer the questions when you hear the answers, then later on they will just have to try to figure out if they've memorized it or not, and that's not the way to do it. With the speaking, I think you need to work one-on-one with a teacher. There's no question, speaking, even people who speak well need to practice, and practice makes perfect in speaking. Here at Hannah Academy, we have lots of experience with people doing speaking tests. We know how to teach speaking. The reading is tactical, really. You need tactics about the reading. Time is a big problem with the reading, and vocabulary, and how to deal with vocabulary that you do not fully understand. Inevitably, for a Korean student, when you do the reading, this is academic level essays. Inevitably, every paragraph there will be 2 or 3 words that you don't understand, and you have to figure out how to deal with that. We can help you deal with that, not only by teaching you better vocabulary, raising the level of your vocabulary, but also teaching you how to figure out what those words might mean and raising your score. Okay? Is this too long? My answer is too long? You can chop them up. You can chop them up, right? SAT, we want to ask me about SAT. I've just been teaching SAT, so we can ask. You want to do the SAT?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Obviously, because I'm a writer, I don't do the mathematics SATs. We do have someone here, Teacher Phil. Maybe you'll be watching a video by Teacher Phil. Phil does the math. I do the English. SAT, hard. It's very, very difficult even for native speakers. The real problem with the SAT is time and organizing. How to get the 65 questions or the 55 questions in 65 minutes, organizing yourself, reading the questions carefully so that you fully understand the questions. I notice with a lot of my students, they're trying to answer questions and they don't understand the question. So the problem with that, of course, is that understanding the question takes time. So SAT is all about time. And you have to work with a good teacher to be able to do SAT quickly enough and well enough to get a good score. Okay? Yeah, all of these little pieces, you can just break it up into little stuff, right?
Piece by piece.
Yeah, piece by piece. Why don't we ask me about working with native speakers? I think this is very important. We don't have one of those, right? You haven't asked me a question about that.
Right.
Okay.
But actually, for the middle school and high school students,
They're not gonna. Mostly they won't have that. Okay.
they will have native teachers class, but not one-on-one. It's
Oh,
group class.
All right.
Because they go to it when they come here,
Mm-hmm.
they enroll in international school,
Okay.
and our drivers will take them to school
Right.
and deliver lunch box. When they
Okay.
are done in the school, maybe 3 p.m., drivers will pick them up, maybe Nobles, Westfields, or some other international schools around here.
Oh, okay.
When they come here, it's going to be 4 p.m. So they can take only 1 or 2 classes and have
Okay.
dinner and do homework
that's
and
good.
sleep.
Okay. So this is for that particular group.
Yes.
Okay.
But actually, there are this kind of early studying abroad, we call it early studying abroad. There are some academies doing like this. Of course, they don't have native teachers. You can we can empathize on having native teachers.
Right.
So question 6 and 7. So, how satisfactory is the academic achievement of students going to international schools in the Philippines? How much satisfactory it is compared to the schools in your country?
You mean the Koreans who come here?
Yes, correct. When you see,
Right.
you don't have to mention that Songhwa and
Right.
your students were born and raised in the
Right.
Philippines.
Right.
You can just say that when you look at your students, like Philippine school is like this compared
Right.
to my country, and if do their best, maybe they can achieve
Right.
good academic achievement.
Right.
Is it okay we do the interview one more time next Sunday?
Sure.
After we edit some videos, I think
Right.
I will send it to the agency that
Right.
Sebo belongs to, and
Yeah.
we will discuss it.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Maybe,
Okay. Yeah. Then
maybe-
focus it more.
Maybe he will give us more questions.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. We'll do it that way, maybe. Yeah, let him feedback because he has very specific knowledge of the specific
Yes.
specific target,
He's
right?
a
The specific target.
specialist.
Right.
And his business was like the Seo used to live in Clark. He was having 20 students in an apartment in Clark.
Right.
He had drivers and cooks and housekeepers.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, let's finish this next week when you get more feedback from him, and then we'll do it that way. That's good. That's not a problem.